by now, most people who are a sports fan, unless you are coming off a vacation, you know that Kyler Murray re-signed, and he re-signed extended his contract for a bunch of money. And there's a clause which was leaked, which he has to have independent study, 4 hours a week, no video games. Right? Which, I'll just be honest with you, I play Madden every year to remember the names of who's playing where. Anybody else do that? Totally do that. Do that for fantasy drafts all the time. Like, oh, yeah. Play every team. Buyer, what was your opinion of this story?
My initial reaction was, who leaked it? Ooh. Who gave the contract to Ian Rappaport where he had a screenshot or a copy of that page that shows that Kyler Murray needed to do this away from the team's facilities?
My guess is whoever did is going to be fired if somebody finds out that they did, because it does look bad on all sides. I don't actually think it looks bad for the Cardinals other than the leak. I'll get to that in a second. Jay Stu, what was your initial reaction?
On face value, it just seemed like a complete indictment on Kyle Murray's work ethic, that you would have to include something that I thought all quarterbacks did into a contract. So that was my initial thought. A complete indictment of Kyler Murray's work ethic, not about his intelligence or anything like that. Just obviously this is a reflection of what the Cardinals think of how he does work outside of work.
Correct. So my take on it was very matter of fact, which is tells you everything you need to know. Now, the spin is, and I think the reality of it is, that the Cardinals can sit back and go like, hey, look, we gave you all this money because we know you have a world of talent. And we know it's not about your aptitude. Right? But you got to put a little bit more work in. And we're going to hold you to it a little bit. Right? We're going to hold you to it. There's a clause in it where it can void the contract. Void the entire contract. And while many of you will say, like, there's all sorts of different comments, the reality is that these contracts, I mean, go look at what happened with Deshaun Watson when he was in Houston. Okay, Deshaun Watson agreed to a contract extension before a season. He played, and that was the season they traded away Nuke Hopkins. But he never played. That was the contract extension didn't start till the next year. He never played a game in that new contract. And he got all his money up front, much like Kyler's getting most of his guarantee, over $100 million up front. So part of it is, honestly, there's a voidable clause within it that's protecting the team. But part of it is, it tells you all you need to know. If the question is, why Kyler Murray, who we all think is pretty talented, look completely inept against a Rams team that they had beaten earlier in the season? He looked totally mentally whipped. And this is a confident dude who has the confidence of the entire team and franchise. How could that happen? They're sitting there telling you, sitting there telling you all you need to know about what they think went wrong. He wasn't prepared. And so the spin to him is like, look, dude, we think you're great. We gave you the money. We trust you with the franchise. You got to put a little more work in. Speaking of which, anybody had an independent study class ever in college? My last 3 hours at Oklahoma State were independent study with Lee Manzer, who's he was the head of the marketing department. And I didn't get my degree until like 4 years later, even though I was way over the number of credits. I just needed this one class, and I took an independent study my last semester of my senior year. And I just, forgot to get the assignments in and yada, yada, yada. Finally got it all like 4 years later. So I'm actually an 04 graduate, even though I walked in 2000. And I have enough credits where I could go back and get a second degree with like one or two other classes, something else in business. Because again, I was like it was just about specific class. I hated independent study. But I get it. You can sit there and go like, well, it's really, I don't know how it got out, Dan. You're right. Like, that's a bad one to get out because it does make him look bad. But it wasn't they made him look bad and didn't give him the money. They made him bad. it was like, look, dude, you're talented. You got to work harder at it.
And the part about it was, and then you can maybe see why someone from the Cardinals wanted to leak it out. But one of the thoughts was that Kyler Murray was very frustrated that the team's second half collapses were put on his shoulders, and felt that he was bearing much of the responsibility of the Cardinals maybe not performing as well in the second half of these last couple of seasons as they did in the first half of those seasons. So now Kyler's mad about being the guy that has to shoulder the load. And hey, and I brought up on the show a bunch of times about DeAndre Hopkins' availability, and I, put some blame on Cliff Kingsbury. And to me, it's that specific angle that also would make Murray mad, but would also want the Cardinals to be like, see, maybe this is why it was on his shoulders, or it wasn't everybody else's fault. And I think that tie into it makes it even more dynamic.
It's interesting. Yes. Here's Cliff Kingsbury, by the way, the head coach of the Cardinals, on if he was involved with the contract.
Yeah, I don't get in on the negotiations. Honestly, my entire role in that was prayer and pleading to both parties, and it worked out really well for me. There's a handful of quarterbacks that you can win a Super Bowl with in this league, and we feel like he's one of them.
I genuinely think the messaging is, we think we can win a Super Bowl with you. You got to put more work in. Like, this is a job. It's not a hobby. You got to be all in on it. If they weren't giving him the contract and that was the reason why, it would be far more demeaning, far more telling. I think this is pretty telling. I think it is exactly what you think it is. The Cardinals are saying, hey, dude, you ain't the first one in, the last one out.